Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey. We're going to go through growing your own coffee, harvesting, processing, roasting, all with no special equipment. Just your two hands, a window screen, and a frying pan. And that's it. It's as simple as that. Why? Well, I like a challenge. And it bothered me that I was so reliant on other sources for my coffee. We were out in the store one day and they didn't have coffee that I wanted, and that prompted me to start this journey. And in doing my research, there was lots of great videos out there, really detailed videos, but there was none that took me from the very beginning, growing it, all the way to the end. And I want to also show how easy it is. Anybody can do this. Anybody can grow their own coffee with a little work. And I wanted to encourage others to grow their own coffee and more. Don't stop there. Supplement your diet. Grow your own stuff. Start a garden. So if you like what you see in the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, make a comment, ask some questions. And finally, a shout out to Maui Fire Department, Kihei Engine number 6. Okay, first step in getting our coffee going is getting some cherries. This is my coffee plant. It's probably about 10 years old. I'm going to go ahead and see if there's a couple left in there. I've already picked a lot of them, but these I'm going to save so that I can sprout and get some more coffee plants going. So I'll get these picked here. All right, now that we got them picked, I got a clean bowl of water, and I'll go ahead and toss them in, see if we got any floaters. If they float, the seeds haven't fully developed and you won't have any beans in there really to roast. Looks like they're all sinking to the bottom. So those will be fully developed and ready for the next step in the process. We're going to begin by separating the flesh from the actual stone or the bean. We're going to get them all out. Okay, after we've got all the flesh off, we can further check to see if any of the seeds are going to be good, or the beans are going to be good. You can see that we have a few floaters in there and some of the ones on the bottom. The chickens are getting kind of excited because they think they're going to get a snack. They're waiting for some of these beans or some of the little fruits that come off of there. So we're going to go ahead and get these separated out so we can get them cleaned up. Okay, now that we've gotten all the ones that were floating out, I'm going to go ahead and clean these up really good, get that little slimy coating off of them, and then dry them off on a paper towel. All right, now we got them all laid out to dry. There's a couple schools of thought on how long you should wait. Should you have them dried out? Should you plant them right away? These two here, these have been dried out for about 3-4 weeks. And you can see they're slightly smaller than these. And what happens after they dry out, the shell gets really hard and it's hard to germinate. It's harder for the plant. Sometimes that shell gets stuck on the leaf and it won't allow it to open. So I prefer just to kind of soak them, clean them, dry them off, and get them right into the soil and get them watered in so that seed can start to germinate, and you'll have better success in germination of your seeds. All right, here's a quick, easy soil mixture that I've had great luck with. I'm sure there's lots of them out there, but this one tends to work really well for me, and I've had great success in getting my plants to grow and my seeds to sprout. So it's 1 part of potting soil, 1 part perlite, 1 part crushed volcanic rock or cinder, and 1 part native soil. That way, when you go ahead and plant them in the ground, if you're going to do that, the plant's ready to go. It's already in part of its native soil. So let's get this mixed up and get it in the little containers so we can get our seeds. Right, after we've got everything mixed and in the little containers we're going to use, just some recycled ones out of the nursery. I've had really good luck in putting this section face down, because sometimes if they're upside down, the roots get turned around and the plant has a hard time finding its way up through the surface. So if you put that little crack down, the root goes right down into the dirt, and it germinates a lot easier. It doesn't take as long. So we'll get all these planted in there, get them covered up. Another thing I wanted to point out was I use perlite when I have dry seeds, and that tends to help germinate them a lot quicker too. We've got them all covered up. We're going to go ahead and put them in the greenhouse and water them in so they can get germinated. Now, if you don't have a greenhouse, you can always put them in a well-lit area inside. I live in Southern California, so being outside isn't that big of a deal. We're lucky enough to have a greenhouse as well. You can also put these inside your house, keep them watered, and anywhere from about 2 weeks to 3 weeks, they should sprout. So keep your eyes out, and we're going to go ahead and get these watered in now. Give these a good soaking here. You want to water them in really good, and come back and water them in again. Make sure they got soaked thoroughly, and then check them out. Just make sure they stay moist, and just keep a lookout on them, and over the next 2 to 3 weeks you should see some coffee sprouting. Now, if you don't have time to wait and you want to get a little bit of a jump start, you can also go to a nursery and purchase a little bit bigger coffee plant. Now, this is one of my seedlings that I had sprouted from my larger one, and it's ready to get in the ground. I've planted probably about another 10 of them in the ground, and we'll show you that later on. After your seeds have sprouted and you've had them a few seasons, they're about this size, they're about ready to go in the ground. And as you can see, mine are planted under banana plants to provide a little bit of cover so they get partial sun throughout the day and they don't burn. They do best as an understory plant. And as you can see here, I've got some smaller ones in the ground, and they're about 3 years old. So this one's just a little behind it. That'll be next to go in the ground. Now you should be well on your way to growing coffee. And if you can't grow it outside, you can always grow it in a greenhouse if you're fortunate to have one of those, or you can grow it as a house plant in a container with just a little effort. As long as you provide well-draining soil, give them a little fertilizer now and then, you should have some good, healthy coffee plants. As you can see right here, not all your cherries are going to be ripe at the same time. So you're going to go ahead and selectively harvest off of your plant for a period of probably about a month as the cherries ripen. Now that we've pretty much cleaned off all the ripe cherries off the coffee plant, we'll go ahead and take them upstairs in our basket and start processing them. You may be wondering why these cherries aren't red, and I did too. After the first year, I did more research and found out that these specific cherries don't get that bright ruby red. They kind of stay yellow when they're ripe like that. So this is the coffee Arabica Nana. Just want to pass that along because that threw me off when I first started growing this. Processing these beans could be tedious, and when you process them, You want to make sure you get both of the beans out of the flesh. There's 2 of them in there. There's 1 and 2. Sometimes you'll find 3 if you're lucky. Alright, now that we've got both of these pans separated, the fruit from the beans, we're going to go ahead and prepare a little soak for the beans to see if we can get them cleaned up and separated. Okay, this next step is really important because what you want to do is you want to go ahead and get all of your beans into a pan of water. And why this is important, number 1, you're going to clean them off, but number 2, any of the beans that you see floating here on the surface, these are no good. So all the beans down here at the bottom are fully developed and they're good. And those are the beans that you're going to want to process. You're going to skim these off the top, get them all out of there, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, as you can see now, we got all the floating beans out, and we're going to go ahead and rinse these really well to get the rest of the flesh off there, get all the little dirt particles out of there, and then we're going to go ahead and set them out to dry. Alright, now that we've got them all cleaned off, what we're going to do is go ahead and spread them out on a screen to dry in the shade. This will take a few days depending on where you're at and the weather, so we'll just go ahead and spread these all out on a screen here. Make sure they're separated pretty good so they can all dry evenly. And then we'll check on them in a few days and see how they are. Okay, it's been about a week now. These beans look like they're pretty much dried and ready to shell. We're going to be doing this manually, and the purpose of this video is to show that you don't need any special equipment or tools or anything else. You can grow coffee in your backyard and do everything by hand, which is what we're going to do. Okay, I'm going to shell a few of these here to show you that it can be done. Here's the green coffee bean inside. I don't know if you can see that very well. Get a little closer. There's 2 main types. There's a Arabica and a Robusta. And the Robusta has a caffeine content of anywhere from 1%, 1.5% up to about 4%. And the Arabica has anywhere from 0.5% to about 1.5%. Now, when these are on the plant, they're in their fruit called the cherry. They're together like that. And in about 10 to 15% of those, there's just one of these in there. And those are called pea berries. And those are supposed to be very, very rich in flavor. So there's some people that just save those and make their coffee out of those. So we're going to go ahead and get more of these done. I won't waste your time with all that. And we'll get back to it when we have something to roast. The tedious process of separating the seeds or the beans from the parchment is over. We now have our jar of green beans. The best way, actually, to store your beans is with the parchment still on it. But that makes it hard to roast when you're ready. So the second best way is to store your green beans in a jar like this or vacuum seal them. And I've had great success with both ways. So let's get these beans ready to roast and get it done. Let's get roasting. These nice green beans. Normally you want to do this in a well ventilated area with your exhaust fan on, all the windows open. I have a small fan blowing right now. It's going to get smoky. Let me turn the heat up here. Get it lit. I like to warm my pan up and my beans at the same time slowly. So you don't put the beans in a hot pan, they start to burn. The main thing you want to take note of is that you got to keep these things moving. I'm also using a wooden spoon for the purpose of the video because this is the tool I normally use and it's just a little bit too noisy, but this does an excellent job. So if you have a whisk like this is what I recommend. And the purpose of doing this, I mean, you can use a popcorn popper to roast it. You can spend some money and get a real roaster, but I just wanted to do this with just the most basic and simplest of tools that you have to show it can be done. And then, I'd be interested to see what other ideas people come up with and kind of improving on the basic way to do it. So I'm going to put this one down. I'm going to start using this. So we're going to slowly start to heat these up together. We want to get the temperature up to about 375 to 420. That's when your roasting is going to really start to take off. So what we're going to do is look for a color change. These are going to start to lighten up, get a little tan, and then the roasting process will begin. I've got a digital thermometer here just to kind of keep track and see what we're doing. We're at about 150 now, slowly warming up. These green beans are going to keep longer, so if you keep them in the jar green, they're going to store longer. Once you roast them, you're going to want to use them pretty quickly. After they're roasted, you're going to want to store them in a glass jar. The easiest thing for me to do is a mason jar. And I leave the lid off for at least 48 hours because they're going to off-gas. So if you notice in the store, they come in the bag, a little vacuum sealed bag, they'll have a vent on them. That's also to allow for some off-gassing. They can off-gas up to about a week, I guess. So I've opened the jar and you'll notice it'll be under pressure. So if you let those gases dissipate, it'll also improve the flavor as well. Roasting is based on basically appearance. You want to look for the appearance of the color of the bean as it roasts, and a crack. They have two cracks. It's like a popcorn crack, called the first crack and the second crack. Now the first crack, after that happens, it's going to be kind of a light roast, and then the second crack is going to be a dark roast. I prefer to kind of go right in the middle of both of them because the second crack, it gets a little dark and the oils are starting to come out, the beans starting to dry out a little bit. So I like to get them right in the middle. Starting to smell them warming up a little bit here. Turn our heat up a tiny bit more. Check and see where we're at. Okay, we're getting right up there. About 225. Some of them are starting to turn a little tan. That's what we're looking for. Main thing is to just keep them moving. Keep them moving. So yeah, after these are done, I'll go ahead and leave them in the jar up to a week with the lid just lightly off, just to allow those gases to escape. And then after that, you can kind of seal it up. But coffee doesn't last too long around here. It's usually consumed before that point. Just keep them moving. You can see they're starting to turn a little tan now. Keep them moving. You can see the chaff starting to come off. chaff is this light stuff. Now don't worry about any of that. Some of that'll burn. You don't want to blow any of that because it's going to make a huge mess in the kitchen. Also keeping in mind that if you do this outside, this process may take longer because the wind is blowing, there's more air circulating, and it's going to cool the temperature down of your pan and your beans. So we should start to hear, yeah, there we go. You're starting to crack now. That's your first crack on some of them. The very first ones are starting to crack. So we just want to keep them moving at this point. Don't let them sit too long. Yeah, I wanted everybody to hear that crack. That's what you look for, the first crack. So keep them moving at that point. I'm going to turn my heat down a tiny bit so they don't overshoot. And keep them really moving at this point. And this is where you want to definitely keep them moving. And this is where this whisk comes in here because this really does a better job, but it's just too noisy for the video. So this is really kind of what you want to use and kind of what you want to do. Just kind of keep them moving. And you just want to kind of keep an eye on them. Don't want them to get too dark. And at a certain point, when they get ready, you're going to want to have a colander so that you can get them off the heat and stop that roasting process. So we're right at 375 right now. I like to keep it right there because it's better to have it a little cooler than too hot and have them go too fast on you. Like I said, some people prefer to wait a good 2 weeks after they've roasted them, but I can't stand that, and I gotta drink it right away. Really getting into a light roast. Some of them are a little darker. I don't know if any of that, you can pick any of that smoke up on there, but if you don't have some good ventilation, man, this is really going to smoke your house out. And then, like I said, if you're doing it outside, just keep that into account because that will take the process a little longer because you have that air cooling everything down. So you kind of have to overcome that. And these are looking really good. I don't, like I said, I don't like a real dark roast. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the fire now. We got some popping for their second crack. And you can see that smoke. That's why you want to do it in a well ventilated area. Now to stop that process, we're going to go ahead and put them in a colander. And we're going to take them outside. Blow that stuff off so we don't make a mess in the kitchen. I don't know if you can see all that chaff flying out there, but you want to do this, kind of cool your beans off. Let all that stuff fly away in the wind. This will probably take you a good 5 minutes, 10 minutes, get this all cleaned up, and let them cool down. And we're almost ready for a cup of coffee. Here's a look at it in the sun. Look at those beans. I think we're ready to have a cup of coffee. And keeping with the basics, I'm going to go ahead and use my mortar and pestle to grind these beans up. Normally I use my old trusty KitchenAid, but since we're doing it with just the basics, I'm going to stick with that. Let's grab some beans and toss them in there and get mashing. Make it work for it a little bit. Check back in a little bit when I get these all ground up. That's pretty good. Man, does that smell good. Just let that sit for a while and check back. Now that's a cup of coffee, right out of your own garden. Enjoy.